I'm joined in our Washington studio by Paolo von Schirach. He's the president of the Global Policy Institute, a public policy research firm. Paolo, welcome to our program.
Pleasure.
Fourth visit by Kim to China in less than a year. Do you believe this, in fact, is laying the foundation for a summit between the U.S. president and the DPRK leader?
Well, look, it looks like leveraging this, right? It looks like Mr. Kim says, hey, I'm not alone in this world. I'm not just this lonely leader of a small country whose only claim to fame is nuclear weapons. I've got friends, and I'm going to show it to you that I got friends because I'm developing this warmer and warmer relationship with my neighbor to the north, and that is China. At the same time, China has its own interest in showing to Mr. Trump, well, if you need to deal with us because we can help you with North Korea. And by the way, don't lean on us too much on trade. This can become a complex chessboard game.
How important is China's role in this situation with the DPRK? China, of course, sponsored a number of resolutions at the UN, has supported tough punishing sanctions against the DPRK. Can China play a role, perhaps, in the next stage of this crisis with the DPRK?
Of course it can. It depends what China wants to do right now. We all know that most of North Korean trade with the rest of the world goes with China or through China, about 90% of it. So that's a lot. So China has an enormous amount of leverage vis-a-vis North Korea. How China wants to play its cards, we don't know exactly. And if it's about setting the stage now for the next summit between Mr. Trump and President Kim, certainly China can do a great deal.
What about in terms of guaranteeing verifiable, tangible steps by the DPRK, a timeline, Paolo, towards denuclearization,
of course,
which we really haven't seen up until this point?
We haven't seen, quite frankly, not much of anything. There's been this very interesting and certainly eye-catching summit in Singapore. First time that the leader of the United States and the leader of North Korea ever met. That's a big deal. But in terms of tangible progress, we haven't seen much. Is there a timeline? Is there a roadmap to denuclearization? We haven't seen that.
Is that going to come during this second summit if it happens with President Trump?
Well, I think ideally, yes, but I wouldn't hold my breath. I mean, I wouldn't say, oh, that's for sure is going to happen. I mean, at some point, the two leaders have to show some progress. There's not just talk.
Not just symbolism.
Exactly. But
well, let me ask you one other thing. Trump has continuously said that, listen, there are no missile tests, there's no nuclear tests by DPRK, and he defines that as a success, in fact. Does the president deserve some credit? Because to that extent, we haven't seen the kind of altercation we have seen before with the testing.
Well, look, yes. I mean, yes and no, in the sense that this has changed the atmosphere in a more positive, more benign way. Every time North Korea tested a new missile or a new warhead or what have you, this was considered some kind of a precursor to some potential conflict. The fact that this hasn't happened since the summit is obviously good news. I mean, if things are quiet and at peace, well, we interpret that as a good sign. But that doesn't mean anything because the capabilities of North Korea are still there, intact. Nothing has been curtailed.
And U.S. sanctions are still in place.
Absolutely. So obviously, Mr. Kim would like to have a better deal in terms of sanctions and the relief from American pressure. On the other hand, the Americans say, hey, before we do that, show us something. And we don't even technically have a complete inventory of the facilities. Exactly.
All right, we'll leave it there. Paolo von Schirach, thank you.